How are you folks? Welcome to the Edgewater Reading Series. If it's your first time here, just to let you know, please turn off your cell phones, or at the very least just put them on silent, not to interrupt any of the readers, because it ends up being distracting and rude, and you wouldn't want that to happen to you while you're reading. I'd like to welcome the honors. Hi, welcome. Thank you for showing. They were kind enough to sponsor our wines. So if you ever have a chance to head over to Honor Wines, they will help you out. They are wonderful. They have lots of really tasty selections. Our selection today is a rosé from Provence. Please enjoy. It's delicious. It's perfect for springtime weather. One of our first readers that I want to introduce is Ted Krever. Ted, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. All right. Ted is a Rhymes of the Ancient Mariner alumni. Now, Rhymes is a recently disbanded open mic and reading series, and unfortunately, they got priced out of their venue. And I think you got priced out of the venue. They got, yeah. That's ridiculous. We don't have that here, thankfully. So we wanted to provide a new home for some of the Rhymes of the Ancient Mariner readers because they're oh so talented and they deserve to have a spotlight. And Ted is one of them. He grew up in the East Village. He's a documentarian and formerly worked in television and news. He even ran a revival house movie theater, and he also is going to share an excerpt from his screwball thriller, and it's called Swindler and Son. And I'm really excited to hear it again. Please welcome Ted.
Thank you. Can you hear me? I don't think so.
Yeah, if you wanna fiddle with that, please feel free.
Hello. Can you hear that? That's good.
That's much better.
Okay, so this is the beginning of a new book. It starts with the sound of my own name spoken aloud. Call me Nicholas, I'm fine. Nick or Nicky, even better. But Nicholas Marsh, enunciated, first and last, all the way through. When I hear it that way, I know I've done something I'm about to pay for. Hearing it in French, leaking from the earpiece of a Parisian counterterrorism officer in a Kevlar vest, his back to me and his binoculars trained on my kitchen window, that's rock bottom. That's how it starts. They're GIGN for sure, French Special Forces, 2 of them, huddled like Martians in flak suits, gas masks, and sniper rifles across the street from my apartment. Scanning the rooftops and the side streets, I see a multitude of dark gray uniforms and hear my name one more time from the headset hanging from the blonde officer's right ear. I back into a doorway, sweating and making 25 different plans at the same time. It's time to go. The bus. They won't be checking the bus heading away. That's my exit. This is a mistake. It's got to be. If I'd done something to deserve counterterrorism, I'd remember it, wouldn't I? Who do I know at GIGN? Am I thinking of escape? Hell no, I'm getting pissed. Why hasn't someone warned me? Why haven't they given me a chance to buy my way out of this? Oh sure, GIGN makes it look serious, but that just raises the price. I know somebody in every department of government and what they cost. Serious things have been undone before. By the time the bus makes 3 stops, I know who to talk to. Beltoise, the second man at the Sûreté. He was at our Christmas party just last night. I own him, at least I should. If I had a middle-class clientele, if I dealt pot, rope, or owned a brothel, I could expect a phone call 24 hours in advance for rate. It's common courtesy. He'll be a dessert, of course, charging his dinner to us, as usual. When I arrive, he's tucked into a dim corner. He rises before I can meet him. Why is GIGN all around my apartment? You don't warn me? Nicky, our past history, and the fact that I like you, is why I'll give you a minute's grace before I call you in. He's serious. His face goes cold, not like he doesn't know me, like he's never seen me before. Normal corruption is one thing, but this, normal corruption is my specialty. He's reducing 10,000 years of civilized give and take to a catchphrase. Not to mention it's fed him quite nicely, thank you, over the years. I look at his face, at the disappointment and condescension there, and realize what a farce it all is. You treat them like princes, but the first time you actually need them to put out, they might as well be in insurance. Faced with this ingratitude, something inside me just gives up. Okay, I tell him, I surrender. What? I'll confess right now, it's the jet ramps, isn't it? He looks confused. We have this client, a dictator. You know the old joke about you're not really a country unless you have your own stamps, your own airline, and your own beer? Well, he's got commemorative stamps, he's got a brewery, a Mercedes stretch limo, and a portrait of himself as Julius Caesar. But he gets embarrassed when his guests have to descend the staircase off the plane. There's a staircase on Air Force One, I tell him, and he says they could have a ramp if they wanted one. So when Kumbada collapsed, we flew a cargo plane in and liberated a couple of jet ramps. The guy was so happy he painted 2 Cessnas and proclaimed them the national airline. I don't think we hurt anybody. Beltois settles into the nearest chair, not saying a word. That's not it? Silence. Okay, Napoleon's penis. That was a good deed, I swear. Excusez-moi? It's your Minister of Defense's fault, not the present minister, the old one. He had this thing about Napoleon's penis, that it should be back in France where it belongs. It is in France. Napoleon's body's at Les Invalides. The body, sure, but his penis was removed during the autopsy, and it's floated around ever since from collector to collector. It's now owned by a urologist, naturally, in Philadelphia. Don't be funny. It's true. The BBC measured it a few years ago and found it a bit small, which outraged the minister, who insisted the English don't know how to measure. He wanted to measure it himself, but the urologist's price was just outrageous, so we found a more generously sized one around the same age for a price the minister could afford. It made him happy. You found him another penis? Another old penis. You think that was easy? How many 300-year-old penises do you think are floating? Beltois stares at me with, I can't tell if it's respect or concern. The odd thing to me is this is actually beginning to feel pretty righteous. Confession really is good for the soul. Okay, not the answer. Give me a chance. The 18 identical one-of-a-kind Moroccan emeralds. No. The Van Gogh with the wrong ear missing. Beltois rolls his eyes. We've never met, he warns, except for a few state dinners with hundreds of other people I've never met either. But my advice is you find a quick way out of France now. You understand? This is terrifying. Beltois is a glorified flatfoot with a fancy office. I'm begging to be arrested and he's not biting. It's unnatural. Throw me a bone here, I say. I don't understand what's happened. He grimaces. You know damn well it's the bomb. The bomb? Of course I know all about the bomb. I'd arrived back in Paris the day before, just in time for the funerals. 12 dead, 37 injured on the Rue Briquet. A miracle it wasn't more. A mountain of flowers and plastic sleeves heaped on the rubble. Candles arrayed like soldiers in front of the dress shop, left somehow intact on the corner. And a march, thousands, orderly and dogged. Middle-class families and university students, Le Président and his rivals. Butchers, bakers, artists, and computer technicians shuffling through neighborhood streets between broad public squares. Solemn and chattering, somber but fashionable. Paris, formal but somehow intimate. Great buildings and beautiful women dressed in black. Paris is a grande dame, maybe a bit past her prime, but she still knows how to put on a funeral. It's an escalation, they say, the voices that multiply in crowds. Just a few years ago, they were content to shoot up a restaurant or a concert hall. Now somehow they bring in a bomb the size of a safe to bring down half a block of 5-story apartment buildings. The size of the explosion makes people nervous. Nobody builds a bomb that size to bring down the Rue Briquet. We all sense a grander plan that went awry, and the fact that no one claimed responsibility only seems to heighten the tension. You don't even have the consolation of knowing who to be afraid of. Beltois, however, has made up his mind. It's your shipping certificate, he yells, your company's letterhead, your signature on the bloody thing. You think I will cover for that? You're insane. I stand frozen for an endless moment, until words I never thought I'd hear myself say come tumbling out of my mouth. I didn't do that. I'm innocent. And then I run.
Thanks so much, Ted. Now you have me wondering about the 300-year-old. Very interesting.
You want a funny, very, very quick funny story?
Yes.
The one time we read this at the last Rime of the Ancient Mariner, I read this and I got off stage. And another guy came up and read it, and after he got off, he came up to me and he said, you know that 300-year-old penis thing, that's very funny. I said, yeah, and he said, that was my urologist. In Philadelphia, Dr. Latimer.
You know everyone is furiously Googling the audio. I hope you know that. So our next reader is Kyoko Hishimu. I really hope I pronounced that correctly. Wow, I'm on a roll, yes! Kyoko is a poet and a painter. She's also an alumni from Pratt, yes. She tackles women's issues and the struggle of African Americans that they face in the society right now, as divisive as it is. She's an author and the illustrator of 4 children's books, being Eki Peki, Up on a Star, Mama May I, and Because My Mommy Told Me So, I Know. She's also currently working on an EP titled Color Story, and it features her poetry and her illustrations, which I hope you'll tell us more about while you're up here. Let's welcome Kyoko. Ted, you are so tall.
Yeah, I'm definitely not that tall. All right, I'm gonna read 3 different pieces. The first 2 are new pieces that I did, and the last one is from my book, Sticks and Stones. It's my first collection of poems that I self-published. This one's called AR-15. America, I too have dreams, but now they're filled with images I'd rather were left out. Bullets blowing across my head, shots ringing out, piercing my skull. Chest torn open on its way out, pulse slowing down until they're breathless. Innocence lost, children gone for dead, strengthened by the Second Amendment. As the Supreme Court once said, carried with him enough ammo to slaughter fields of friends, raising loved ones, and now them down to the end. Windows shattering from the blast, teachers blocking bullets so they cannot pass. Ammo accelerating at lightning speed, stripping life from children as they scurry to dodge from sight, parents on their knees. Catastrophic pillage of school facilities, assaulting families with military-style casualties, with rifles stored under their beds, fixed with cartridges of bullets targeting their heads. Columbine, Parkland, Sandy Hook, Virginia Tech, University of Texas, Northern Illinois University. Who's going to protect us as we lay kisses on our children's graves, bodies whose legacies are entwined in the upheaval of gun culture, a national tragedy where the victims of bullying become gunmen, terrorists of unfettered and unhinged animosity, as we are left there, directed to prey by our leaders, in the land of the free. Free to bear arms but not to protect thee. Free to speak but not about gun-related madhouse murder sprees. Free to live life and liberty, but not in these walls which confine me, while we are hiding, crying. When will government enforce laws to shelter us from harm? When will the NRA consider public outrage and sound an alarm? But put people before profit and restrict the weapon on their arms. Rampage of mutilated bodies, scattered and left exposed. Mommy, will you remember me? He's coming, armed legally. He walks among you, through school halls hiding his identity. This next one is called MAGA. America, to be great again, you have to begin with great. And where we started is from ships, which tore the soles of our feet from the soil of our land, as we were ripped from our families. Africa, a home which no longer our tongues speak. America has built itself on bodies like me, raped through masters who profit from prisons instead of plantations, still worked by brothers and sisters covered with covert companies, carried in the crutches of the Ku Klux Klan who swear they are keeping a mindful watch through eyes of distant stares. This is capital murder, where those who wear masks of blue, coded like a plague of undeserved evil, praised for killing in fear, where the hue of their linen supersedes the life of the African-American black, the shackled black man. Mr. Africa, your skin intimidates and invalidates police rights to breathe. From beating Rodney King to murdering Eric Gardner, Michael Brown, Philando Castile, Oscar Grant, our children, Tamir Rice. just alligator bait, whose life was stolen and shot, life regarded no better than tackle and spoiled food. My brother, Zion, a warrior who defies the protection of Bethlehem, for he keeps me in a sea of sheep, preyed upon to protect master's grave, 6 feet deep. Jah, my father, who has led me to his feet, a drum of pledged allegiance, to a son I cannot see, but whose sacrifice I still repeat. Arms out extended, shots piercing bodies like nails through skin, not so unfamiliar to him. Wooden nails sharply chiseled through the speed of the wind, a fire shot, hands around our necks so we cannot breathe. As cops approach me, I shudder beneath my breath. Heavy with little consolation, police stay away from me. Remember, you swore an oath to protect me and my family. This last poem you can find in my book, Sticks and Stones. It's available on Amazon. I also have copies here if you want. They're $15.
Woo-hoo.
It's called It's Snowing in the City. I listen to the sirens blaring, angry shouts bleeding through the curves of my ears, like megaphones, actions militant in its approach. Words stomping down each breath exhaled, puffs of cold air escaping through the officer's nose and mouth. Oh, how it triggers memories of being a kid and pretending to smoke the end of a pretzel. I wish I could return to innocent times where color was defined by Crayola. My gaze returns to the young man whose arms are held behind him, ready to be cuffed. The wind rustles through the city in hisses and intermittent honks from cabbies. Looks of disbelief envelop the young's disposition, NYPD hands falling down his waist side. Through the city who boasts diversity, I see nothing but systematic mishandling of civil liberties. Seems like they've paved their grounds with lawless abandonment. Whose home is this really? If the city never truly accepts minorities. We are a melting pot of cultures, an eclectic blends of accents and complexions. Traffic stops, gridlocked by men hiding behind uniforms to cover their racial biases. Stereotypes of black men and Hispanic men, crippling progressive movements away from slavery. We are but a society mastered by white egos, strings tugging at freedom like puppeteers manipulating their own play. I watch as sons are lined against bodega walls. One day, my son will walk these streets too, identified by an X, branding his body as if using a hot iron. A caste which terrorizes and burns one's soul. Suspicion is a birthright. Suspicion is my father, my brother, my friend, my son, my lover, my neighbor, my community. Suspicion is defined only by living as a black man. He yells for him to stop, to spread his legs. I feel violated just watching. Hands roping the edges of his clothes, down the lining of his shoulders, the contours of his shoulders, down the sides of his pants, up through the inseams of his pants, over his manhood. Why is the word no not acceptable in this moment? Why is authority allowed to force themselves onto our black men, as if this is normal behavior? Why has it become acceptable practice? Our youth are being called out for owning their color, shades of rich brown, deep and light hues. This is my home, my city of sleepless nights. My hands are marked with guilt for crimes that were uncommitted, staring through blank eyes, who hope to throw our men in the back seat of their cop car. I wonder how long it will be before stop and frisk will come to a halt. A failure of laws that believe that if you target and incarcerate a small group of men, it means the masses are criminals, and justifies stripping constitutional rights from these men. I stare as his body tenses. as he wonders what he did wrong, strangers casting him as a sinner, a drug dealer, a thief, a murderer. Yet he is none of these. He is in truth a son. He is a brother. He is a father. He is a black man heading home from a hard night work. It's cold in this city, but all he can think about is, what if my son wore a hoodie? Would he be mistaken for a robber? What if his hands were in his pockets to keep warm? Would police think he is concealing a gun? What if his boots make too much noise walking down, noise when he steps? Would someone report that he is walking in a no blacks allowed block? Yes, I think we are trampling on individuals' civil liberties, and I want equal justice for all. Because life and death means our youth are not hailed in a shower of bullets by the men that are placed on the streets to protect themselves. Life and death does not mean protect the ignorant from the innocent.
Thank you so much, Kyoko. If you want to take a moment to put some of your books in the back, Kyoko's books are going to be put in the back by the entrance table right there. If you're interested in purchasing them, please approach her at the end of the show and let her know. And just talk to her and tell her she did a great job. She did. So our next reader, Benjamin Selesnik. Did I pronounce your name right? I'm on a roll! He's currently studying at Northeastern University. He has been a reader for the memoir mixtapes, and that's a project that combines music and prose, which is really interesting. Check it out if you have a chance. He also, sorry, I got distracted by the dog, which is down the courtyard. I think he's okay. His work has also been featured in Bitter Oleander, The Empty Mirror, and Perihelion. He's going to be reading us a short about a little boy, and I can't wait to have you hear it. Benjamin, come on up.
Yeah, this is a short I wrote almost a year ago at this point. And thank you both for reading. You guys did a great job. That's really awesome. So this story is called Pens. Miss Gardner was kneeling next to Sean, a 5-year-old self-proclaimed master of finger painting. His fingers were coated with green and yellow paint, and he smeared these colors in large oscillating circles on a thick sheet of paper. "What are you drawing?" Miss Gardner asked. "Snowmans." "Snowmen, Sean." Miss Gardner stood up and surveyed her preschool classroom. The room was her creation. The posters, painting, and toys were hers from previous classrooms and lifetimes. The set of alphabet letters and little blocks were hers. The colored carpets that had towns designed on them were also hers. The plastic fruit on her desk and the Beanie Baby collection were hers as well. If she could put her mattress in the classroom, she would spend her nights here. On the opposite end of the room sat a boy. His name was Toby. Miss Gardner liked to keep tabs on him. Toby hardly socialized. Instead, he would paint and pace in class, and when he was outside, he'd draw pictures in the dirt. Miss Gardner would gently bring him back in the group when it seemed appropriate, but other times she would simply watch him as he rustled around in his own world. Toby had a row of pens placed in front of him. He was sitting cross-legged on the ground, touching each pen in what appeared to be a very particular and precise order. He'd skip every other pen and then go back and touch the one that he'd missed. Then he'd repeat the pattern with his other hand. Then he'd do it all over again until each finger had touched each pen. The process went very quickly as Miss Gardner watched from the middle of the classroom. She saw him go through this procedure 3 times while ignoring the students at her feet. She walked over and attempted to disturb his process. "Toby," she said, "are you going to draw something?" Toby shook his head and continued pointing at the pens. His pokes pushed the pens out of place, for they were spaced evenly from one another. But then the pokes from his other hands would push them back into their original position. "Is there something you want to do with the pens? Maybe you can make shapes out of them?" "No," is all he said. "Then can you tell me what you're doing?" Toby shook his head again and continued his poking. His brow was rumpled up, his cheeks pushed upwards on his face, his dingy blonde hair dripping over his forehead and into his vision. "Are you sure?" He nodded his head. I could join you, Miss Gardner said, letting the statement hang in the air like a question. Toby stopped and looked up at Miss Gardner. His eyes looked glassy like the edge of a fish tank. Miss Gardner held his gaze for as long as he allowed. Just for a little bit, she asked. Toby picked his head up and began pointing at the pens. You touch this one, then this one, then this one. Then you touch this last one. Then you go this one, this one, this one, and this one. Then you do it with the other hand, then the other fingers. Miss Gardner bent down and started touching the pens the way Toby described. She got through the first row of pens before Toby jumped in. You did it wrong. You're supposed to start with the left hand. You start with the right. Undo it. Undo it and start with the left. Miss Gardner sat back on her heels. How am I supposed to undo it? I don't know, he yelled. Okay, Toby, that's all right. Miss Gardner cupped her hands over her mouth in contemplation. She removed her hands and held them above the pens. Is there anything I can do to help? He let out a grunt. Just move your hands over the pens and ask if you can undo it. Miss Gardner nodded her head and complied. Toby watched with thin eyes. She waved her hands over them and asked, Pens, may I take back what I did? She looked up at Toby for recognition to see if she completed the task the way he described. But instead of seeing a face of assertion or approval, she saw Toby's head sunk between his shoulders. His bangs blocked her view of his face, but after waiting a few seconds, she saw a tear drip off his nose and into his lap. Dear, Miss Gardner said, it's okay. She got up and sat next to him, putting a hand on his shoulder. She looked to the teacher's aide, Miss Perry, who was across the room helping Sean put the paints away, and beckoned her to come over. Ask again, Toby said. Miss Gardner obliged. Pens, may I please take back what I did? Miss Perry looked on with confusion as Toby's tears continued to melt off his nose like candle wax. Toby, can you tell Miss Perry and I what's wrong? Toby shook his head. Sitting there, he didn't look like the 4-year-old child that he was. He looked younger, infantile even. Can you tell Miss Perry? He shook his head. How about me? Can you tell me what's wrong? He didn't nod his head, but he didn't shake it either. Miss Perry got the signal and went back over to the other side of the room to help Sean, who'd opened up the paints again. Was I able to undo it? Miss Gardner asked. Yes, Toby whispered, but the pens don't want you touching them. How come? They think you did enough. But the pens can't talk, sweetie. How can you know what they're thinking? They didn't say anything, Toby said. That's how you know.
Story gives me a gut punch every time. So our next reader is another Rhymes of the Ancient Mariner alum, Sia Moet, and I hope I pronounce this one right. Yes. I'm going to keep going to the last one. She's a poet that grew up on the Lower East Side as well. She's a recipient of the Elizabeth George Grant for Fiction, even though she'll be reading her poetry today. And her anthology, Fucking Him, debuted both in Poland and at the Queen's World Film Fest. So I'm very, very excited for her to read our poetry to us today.
Thank you so much. It's incredible being part of this series. It's great work. Makes me want to write more.
Do it.
And work harder. From the new series, California Dreaming, 3 pieces. California Dreaming. Morning. Like all the other visits, I find you sitting in the California condo your big sister willed to you in legal documents only ancient children spitting out abject poverty could come up with. Her once luxurious lime green sofa, now filthy with old clothes and tobacco stains. Hello, Dad, I say. And for one brief sliver of a minute, we grin at one another. And you tell me you are glad to see me. Still, millions of minutes tell me otherwise, for what little I have to offer you offers little to you, except this. The minute I step through your front door, I become the air you can finally breathe in, sigh out, and then, like all the other visits before, begin. Begin to pour out your broken heart to me. Once you were loved. Once you loved. Once there was a tall blonde goddess, just like the ones you watched in cowboy movies at the Delancey Street Lowies. The depression dragging on, the daily air you breathe filled with hunger and rats and beatings and inedible cheese dispersed in the back of trucks by the government. But once, there was a tall blonde goddess you dreamed of in movies. Until one day, in 1970-something, after rage had destroyed your wedding vows, and your wife, my mother, no longer loved you, those movies came to life when the tall blonde goddess stepped through your New York front door, and she was this, and you were that, and then she said that, and then you said this, and then you kissed her. That first kiss. You tell me all about that first kiss. And then after that first kiss, you tell me not for the first time, and definitely not for the last. You tell me, she said, she felt more passion in that one kiss than all the years with an unloving husband. And like all the other visits, I've become the air you can breathe in, sigh out. Afternoon. Like all the other visits, each day I return, watch you drift into memory. Like the rowboat rides you used to take me on Central Park Pond, a vast ocean of peacefulness not found with your wife, my mother. And like all the other visits, each retelling, each recalling becomes a letter in a bottle, flung across the desert where you now live. Maybe one day that bottle will wash up in the middle of the desert she now lives in, still with that unloving husband. Maybe the bottle will remember that kiss to her, and remembering that kiss, maybe she'll return to your arms, step through the front door of your California condo, grin, become the air you can finally breathe in, sigh out, even if millions of minutes tell us otherwise. Evening. Like all the other visits, you drift into each dusk, your hopes and dreams nodding against sofa pillows. I watch your sleep become prayers that murmur reassurances. Love has returned, love has come home, love is here. You rock in your own rowboat in a vast ocean of peacefulness. And I remember my own letters and bottles. I too flung desperately across deserts, begging, please, return to me. And watching you wake, I remember how opening my eyes from rare rest shattered emptiness against my skin. Night. Like all the other visits, I heat up your dinner delivered to senior citizens by cheerful volunteers and turn on your 6 o'clock television show. Some cowboy shoot 'em up and mascara glistens on those frontier women. You hoot and holler like a little boy at the Delancey Street Lowies. And in that brief moment, that brief minute, love is still possible. Disappointment still far, far away until it's time for me to leave you and I answer your grumblings with sweet words and reassurances like rest well. I will return tomorrow. And then, like all the other visits, once night air hits my face, I rush off the filth and old tobacco smoke clinging to baggy clothes I hide myself in, and then frantically stomp through big California discount malls, trying on dresses I will never get to wear. But like all the other visits before, for one brief minute, in a dingy dressing room mirror, I see a woman someone could love again, someone could return to. Bye-bye love, bye-bye sweet caress. As planes rush me through time and space, millions of your minutes drain into hospice sheets. The smart blonde social worker holds your hand, murmuring reassurance, I'm on my way, when suddenly you open your eyes, look deeply into hers, and say, I love you. It is the last time you speak. When I rush in those last few minutes, the smart blonde social worker insists, you thought you were talking to your daughter you were so proud of. But I know better. I know those last clear words were not for me. You opened your eyes, and seeing colors of shimmering gold and light sunshine, died, thinking the tall blonde goddess you had loved for millions and millions of minutes had finally finally return home to you. Epilogue. Recuerdo. The only time I miss you is when I listen to that old beat-up cassette you made me, a Spanish guitar remembering a once beautiful fortress. That piece was our castle we built around our own broken hearts as I whispered to you my little girl fears. And you, out of earshot from your wife, my mother, who strode ahead with your older daughter, my big sister, and you whispered back reassurances. Do not be afraid. Death is just a much-needed rest after hard work and a long, long life. I'm looking forward to it. Now, I listened to friends' cries echo and clang against walls once lived in with parents they missed so much. It's a language I don't understand. And perhaps they cry for the secrets their parents never told them, but I've heard all your secrets. I don't cry anymore. Except between the hours of 12 and 3, where in a once beautiful fortress, I rise up words from your buried life and our broken hearts. When the clock finally chimes, I escape to efforts that define my own failings and to a man who loves me, not just between the cracks of music, but always. Thank you so much.
Talking about gut punches, that blonde social worker though. Oh my God. So our last and final reader of tonight is actually patching in via video. Mike Potenza is a writer, director, and photographer. I mean, he's phenomenal at all of them. He's written over 30 screenplays, along with many short stories, including tonight's, which is crazy considering how young he is. He's currently studying at Brooklyn College, pursuing a career in education. So I can't wait to see that next leg of his journey. And he's going to bring a short story to us. So I'm going to cue up the video, and please enjoy.
Hi guys, my name is Mike Potenza, and I'm here to read my short story, I Was Afraid. I really wanted to start off by thanking everybody for having me here, everybody involved. I really appreciate it. I also really appreciate the accommodations made so that I can read via video because I couldn't physically be here tonight. I tried to get off work and I couldn't, so this is a great alternative. As much as I would like to be here, I'm still really happy that you guys can hear my story. The story came to me from a dream I had. Basically, a very vivid dream, and it was surprisingly vivid, and that's kind of why I wanted to turn it into a story. And I really, my goal setting out writing it was to sort of paint the picture, using language to paint the picture that I had in my mind and sort of convey it in a way that you guys can sort of see it too. And I interpreted the meaning of the dream one way. You guys will probably have an entirely different interpretation, and that's good. I want that. Often with dreams, they are open to interpretation, and so the differing opinions and different interpretations of the dream would be really cool to hear. So I guess I can just get right into it. So the name of the story is I Was Afraid. I died once, I think. I'm not entirely sure if I'm being honest. The details of how I died aren't relevant. Just assume they were as bland and unceremonious as any other death, and honestly aren't worth your time. What came after was far more interesting. When I first woke up, I soon realized I was in the same place as I was before, environmentally speaking. The earth was familiar. This was no heaven and no hell worse than the one we already lived in. It was very much the same place I had been before. The only thing that had changed was myself. I soon came to realize with much trial and error, that I was no longer able to die, and no longer able to be hurt. I was still human, but I was so much more. I possessed a strength tenfold of what I had before. My skin itself was an armor lighter than a grain of sand, yet contemporarily more durable than diamond. My movement was no longer limited to the ground, but now to the sky as well. I was invincible, immortal, alone, and very afraid. When you can do what I can and aren't completely devoid of a soul, I feel there's a certain moral obligation to help and protect people, or at the very least, drive away the forces that would seek to do them harm, which is exactly what I was doing that night. That night, my journey, which had up until that point been long, arduous, and quite frankly a story for another day, had taken me to a thick forest, or maybe a jungle. I'm not particularly geographically savvy. All that I know is that there were a lot of trees and a lot of dirt. You probably would know what type of tree-abundant area I was exploring if I were to describe it in greater detail, but even if I wanted to do that, I couldn't. For the forest I was in was pitch black. I'm speaking hyperbolically, of course. There was enough natural light that I could see my hands in front of me and the faint outlines of trees and small hills nearby, but nothing more. I was afraid. I'm not ashamed to admit it. While I was stumbling in that dark wooded area searching for a monster who had committed unspeakable acts, all while being unable to see, I was afraid. Rationally speaking, this fear made no sense, for, as I've told you before, I was already dead, and therefore, as far as I know, couldn't die again. Even if I could, my skin was impenetrable. I could feel no pain. I possessed great strength. There were no danger to me in these woods. Otherwise, I would likely not be searching for this monster. Despite all that I have just said, I was still afraid, and I didn't know why. It was cold outside. The trees and clouds above were dense, and there was a humidity in the air that promised rain, but a stillness in the air that guaranteed it would be no thunderstorm, which was a small comfort. However, as I stumbled clumsily through this dark wood, with the only sound being the crunching of my own footsteps against the foliage beneath, I felt a cold inside of me that had nothing to do with the weather. I felt this cold in my legs most prominently, which... I remembered nothing. But a stillness in the air that guaranteed it would be no thunderstorm, which was a small comfort. However, as I stumbled clumsily through this dark wood, with the only sound being the crunching of my own footsteps against the foliage beneath, I felt a cold inside of me that had nothing to do with the weather. I felt this cold in my legs most prominently, which, through the force of sheer will, I forced to move, step by step, despite their silent protests. I remember noting the sardonic irony of the fact that while I could literally fly away from this place, there would be no benefit to doing so, as my enemy was here, on the ground, in this cold, dark, and scary forest. So I willed my cold, numb, and uncooperative legs to press on. After what felt like hours, but was probably just under one, I stumbled upon a cabin. And I do mean stumbled, because I quite literally slipped on a particularly slippery clump of wet leaves, which slipped me, oh so gracefully, right into the foundation of the building. I would love to describe to you what this cabin looked like, but I can't because, well, it was dark. What I can tell you is that quite like everything else in this park, it was made mostly of damp wood. I felt around for an entrance, and when I found one, I was horrified to find that the door was unlocked. I had hoped for one naive moment that if the door was locked, I'd be forced to leave, which I knew was untrue, as I could have rather effortlessly forced this door from its hinges and proceeded inside, but that was not necessary. Once I was inside the building, I was no longer afraid. I was terrified. I knew in my core that what I was looking for was in here. This time it really was pitch black. There were no windows that I could see, and the building was so silent I was able to hear my own heartbeat. I kept mentally reminding myself that nothing in this building could hurt me, and that there was no danger, but it made me no less prepared for the absolute horror I felt when I felt a pair of hands grab my arm from the darkness. I yelled then, a horrifying sound that I didn't even know my lungs were capable of making, as I threw the monster away from my body. The monster scrambled about the room. I could not see where it was, where I was, or what I was doing, which made this conflict far more clumsy than it could have been. I was more terrified than I had ever been now, even more than I was when I was alive and had my own mortality to defend. Finally, the monster went back onto the offensive. It grabbed my shirt and felt around for what I could only surmise was my neck. In that moment, the terror was so great that I could no longer think logically. All sense of reason had been lost to me in that terrible darkness, and so, out of pure instinct, I flew upwards with all of my superhuman might. I remember crashing through the roof of the cabin, hitting the branches and leaves of the trees above, but I did not stop. I just kept flying higher and higher and higher. The air was getting colder and wetter, and as I flew through the clouds, I could still see nothing. My world grew darker and colder and more wet as I flew higher and higher, but still the monster did not let go. The fear was insufferable, and then finally, I saw a light. I was in the sky now, as high as one could possibly go before leaving the atmosphere entirely, and subject to the coldness of space. A sensation I really don't want to describe to you. I had been up here before, a long time ago. What person, after just learning they had the power to fly at will, wouldn't attempt to see how high they could ascend? This was as high as I had ever dared to go, though. Any higher, and I would leave the world I knew far behind. Something I was just not ready to do. I began to calm down as I was able to see once more. The light from the sun illuminated the earth, and below me I saw the dark rain clouds that covered the sky and the surface. I looked upon the monster who had grabbed me, but I was shocked to see not a monster, but a woman. A beautiful woman, perhaps the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. I would describe her to you, but I am selfish, and I wish to keep the reality of her profound beauty to myself. But for your own convenience, just imagine someone you have seen on a bus or a train that you thought was stunningly beautiful, who, after that fleeting moment, you would never see again. That's the person who's staring at me in that moment, with a look of bewilderment that I would have probably found humorous had I not been making the exact same expression at her. After a moment or two of eye contact, she finally let go of my shirt. She drifted backward, somewhat whimsically, and I realized that she too was able to fly. She just looked at me silently, and I reciprocated. When there was no more cause for silence, I spoke. You know, this is the highest I have ever been. The woman looked back at me for a moment, taking in what I had just said, and then finally, she too spoke. This is as far as I've ever gone to. But you know what's weird? When we're here, above the clouds, we aren't afraid. But below them, we're terrified. Why do you think that is? She turned her attention toward the sun, and I looked as well. Looking into the light, I realized I was no longer afraid. I turned to speak to the woman again, but she was gone. I was once again alone, but no longer was I afraid. I could finally see. And that was my short story. I hope you all enjoyed it. I just want to reiterate and thank everybody again for having me here and for making all the accommodations so that I could read to you today. It really was a pleasure, and I really hope to do more readings for you guys in the future. Thank you so much.
As you can see, Mike Potenza is my glasses buddy. We got them together, we match. Thank you everyone for coming out. Thank you for all the readers and everybody being super respectful and really supportive of the readers that came here today to bare their souls. You guys are the best. And please enjoy the rest of this wine and the rest of these cheese and crackers and mingle. Talk to your readers. Let them know that they did a great job. Let them know something about yourself, and just enjoy each other. I almost forgot to tell you, next month is actually our last event of the month before we're gone for the year, and we'll return next season. Thanks, guys.